Chapter 8 of the Holy War. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. The Holy War by John Bunyan. Chapter 8. Now when the time was come and the court set, commandment was sent to Mr. Trueman, the jailor, to bring the prisoners down to the bar. Then were the prisoners brought down, pinioned and chained together, as the custom of the town of Mansoul was. So when they were presented before the Lord Mayor, the recorder, and the rest of the honourable bench, first the jury was empannelled, and then the witnesses sworn. The names of the jury were these: Mr. Belief, Mr. True Heart, Mr. Upright, Mr. Hate Bad, Mr. Love God, Mr. See Truth, Mr. Heavenly Mind, Mr. Moderate, Mr. Thankful, Mr. Good Work, Mr. Zeal for God, and Mr. Humble. The names of the witnesses were Mr. Know All, Mr. Tell True, Mr. Hate Lies, with my Lord Will-be-will and his man, if need were. So the prisoners were set to the bar. Then said Mr. Do-right, for he was the town clerk, Set atheism to the bar, jailor. So he was set to the bar. Then said the clerk, Atheism, hold up thy hand. Thou art here indicted by the name of atheism, an intruder upon the town of Mansoul, for that thou hast perniciously and doltishly taught and maintained that there is no God, and so no heed to be taken to religion. This thou hast done against the being, honour, and glory of the king, and against the peace and safety of the town of Mansoul. What sayest thou? Art thou guilty of this indictment, or not? Atheism. Not guilty. Crier. Call Mr. Know All, Mr. Tell True, and Mr. Hate Lies into the court. So they were called, and they appeared. Then said the clerk, You, the witnesses for the king, look upon the prisoner at the bar. Do you know him? Then said Mr. Know All, Yes, my lord, we know him. His name is Atheism. He has been a very pestilent fellow for many years in the miserable town of Mansoul. Clerk. You are sure you know him? No. Know him? Yes, my lord, I have heretofore too often been in his company to be at this time ignorant of him. He is a Diabolonian, the son of a Diabolonian. I knew his grandfather and his father. Clerk. Well said. He standeth here indicted by the name of atheism, etc., and is charged that he hath maintained and taught that there is no God, and so no heed need be taken to any religion. What say you, the king's witnesses, to this? Is he guilty or not? No. My lord, I and he were once in Villain's Lane together, and he at that time did briskly talk of diverse opinions. And then and there I heard him say that, for his part, he did believe that there was no God. But, said he, I can profess one, and be as religious too, if the company I am in, and the circumstances of other things, said he, shall put me upon it. Clerk. You are sure you heard him say thus? No. Upon mine oath I heard him say thus. Then said the clerk, Mr. Tell True, what say you to the king's judges touching the prisoner at the bar? Tell. My lord, I formerly was a great companion of his, for the which I now repent me, and I have often heard him say, and that with very great stomachfulness, that he believed there was neither God, angel, nor spirit. Clerk. Where did you hear him say so? Tell. In Black-mouthed Lane, and in Blasphemers' Row, and in many other places besides. Clerk. Have you much knowledge of him? Tell. I know him to be a Diabolonian, the son of a Diabolonian, and a horrible man to deny a deity. His father's name was Never be Good, and he had more children than this atheism. I have no more to say. Clerk. Mr. Hate Lies, look upon the prisoner at the bar. Do you know him? Hate. My lord, this atheism is one of the vilest wretches that ever I came near or had to do with in my life. I have heard him say that there is no God. I have heard him say that there is no world to come, no sin nor punishment hereafter. And, moreover, I have heard him say that it was as good to go to a whorehouse as to go to hear a sermon. Clerk. Where did you hear him say these things? Hate. In Drunkard's Row, just at Rascal's Lane end, at a house in which Mr. Impiety lived. Clerk. Set him by, jailor, and set Mr. Lustings to the bar. Mr. Lustings, thou art here indicted by the name of Lustings, an intruder upon the town of Mansoul, for that thou hast devilishly and traitorously taught, by practice and filthy words, that it is lawful and profitable to a man to give way to his carnal desires, and that thou, for thy part, hast not, nor never wilt, deny thyself of any sinful delight, as long as thy name is Lustings. How sayest thou, art thou guilty of this indictment or not? Then said Mr. Lustings, My lord, I am a man of high birth, and have been used to pleasures and pastimes of greatness. I have not been wont to be snubbed for my doings, but have been left to follow my will as if it were law. And it seems strange to me that I should this day be called into question for that not only I, but almost all men do either secretly or openly countenance, love, and approve of. Clerk. Sir, we concern not ourselves with your greatness, though the higher the better you should have been. But we are concerned, and so are you now, about an indictment preferred against you. How say you, are you guilty of it or not? Lust. Not guilty. Clerk. Crier, call upon the witnesses to stand forth and give their evidence. Crier. Gentlemen, you the witnesses for the king, come in and give your evidence for our lord the king against the prisoner at the bar. Clerk. Come, Mr. Know-all, look upon the prisoner at the bar. Do you know him? No. Yes, my lord, I know him. Clerk. What is his name? No. His name is Lustings. He was the son of one Beastly, and his mother bare him in Flesh Street. She was one evil concupiscence's daughter. I knew all the generation of them. Clerk. Well said. You have heard his indictment. What say you to it? Is he guilty of the things charged against him, or not? No. My lord, he has, as he saith, been a great man indeed, and greater in wickedness than by pedigree, more than 1,000-fold. Clerk. But what do you know of his particular actions, and especially with reference to his indictment? No. I know him to be a swearer, a liar, a Sabbath-breaker. I know him to be a fornicator and an unclean person. I know him to be guilty of abundance of evils. He has been, to my knowledge, a very filthy man. Clerk. But where did he use to commit his wickedness? In some private corners, or more open and shamelessly? No. All the town over, my lord. Clerk. Come, Mr. Telltrue, what have you to say for our lord the king against the prisoner at the bar? Tell. My lord, all that the first witness has said I know to be true, and a great deal more besides. Clerk. Mr. Lustings, do you hear what these gentlemen say? Lust. I was ever of opinion that the happiest life that a man could live on earth was to keep himself back from nothing that he desired in the world. Nor have I been false at any time to this opinion of mine, but have lived in the love of my notions all my days. Nor was I ever so churlish, having found such sweetness in them myself, as to keep the commendations of them from others. Then said the court, There hath proceeded enough from his own mouth to lay him open to condemnation. Wherefore set him by, jailor, and set Mr. Incredulity to the bar. Incredulity set to the bar. Clerk. Mr. Incredulity, thou art here indicted by the name of Incredulity, an intruder upon the town of Mansoul, for that thou hast feloniously and wickedly, and that when thou wert an officer in the town of Mansoul, made head against the captains of the great King Shaddai, when they came and demanded possession of Mansoul. Yea, thou didst bid defiance to the name, forces, and cause of the king, and didst also, as did Diabolus thy captain, stir up and encourage the town of Mansoul to make head against and resist the said force of the king. What sayest thou to this indictment? Art thou guilty of it, or not? Then said Incredulity, I know not Shaddai. I love my old prince. I thought it my duty to be true to my old prince. I thought it my duty to be true to my trust, and to do what I could to possess the minds of the men of Mansoul, to do their utmost to resist strangers and foreigners, and with might to fight against them. Nor have I, nor shall I change mine opinion for fear of trouble, though you at present are possessed of place and power. Then said the court, The man, as you see, is incorrigible. He is for maintaining his villainies by stoutness of words, and his rebellion with impudent confidence. And therefore set him by jailor, and set Mr. Forget-good to the bar. Forget-good set to the bar. Clerk. Mr. Forget-good, thou art here indicted by the name of Forget-good, an intruder upon the town of Mansoul, for that thou, when the whole affairs of the town of Mansoul were in thy hand, didst utterly forget to serve them in what was good, and didst fall in with the tyrant Diabolus against Shaddai the king, against his captains and all his host, to the dishonour of Shaddai, the breach of his law, and the endangering of the destruction of the famous town of Mansoul. What sayest thou to this indictment? Art thou guilty, or not guilty? Then said Forget-good, Gentlemen, and at this time my judges, as to the indictment by which I stand of several crimes accused before you, pray attribute my forgetfulness to mine age, and not to my wilfulness, to the craziness of my brain, and not to the carelessness of my mind. And then I hope I may be by your charity excused from great punishment, though I be guilty. Then said the court, Forget-good, Forget-good, thy forgetfulness of good was not simply of frailty, but of purpose, and for that thou didst loathe to keep virtuous things in thy mind. What was bad thou couldst retain, but what was good thou couldst not abide to think of. Thy age, therefore, and thy pretended craziness, thou makest use of to blind the court withal, and as a cloak to cover thy knavery. But let us hear what the witnesses have to say for the king against the prisoner at the bar. Is he guilty of this indictment, or not? Hate. My lord, I have heard this Forget-good say that he could never abide to think of goodness, no, not for a quarter of an hour. Clerk. Where did you hear him say so? Hate. In Albase Lane, at a house next door to the sign of the Conscience seared with a hot iron. Clerk. Mr. Know-all, what can you say for our lord the king against the prisoner at the bar? No. My lord, I know this man well. He is a Diabolonian, the son of a Diabolonian. His father's name was Love-nought, and for him I have often heard him say that he counted the very thoughts of goodness the most burdensome thing in the world. Clerk. Where have you heard him say these words? No. In Flesh Lane, right opposite to the church. Then said the clerk, Come, Mr. Tell-true, give in your evidence concerning the prisoner at the bar, about that for which he stands here as you see, indicted by this honourable court. Tell. My lord, I have heard him often say he had rather think of the vilest thing than of what is contained in the Holy Scriptures. Clerk. Where did you hear him say such grievous words? Tell. Where? In a great many places, particularly in Nauseous Street, in the house of one Shameless, and in Filth Lane, at the sign of the Reprobate, next door to the descent into the pit. Court. Gentlemen, you have heard the indictment, his plea, and the testimony of the witnesses. Jailor, set Mr. Hardheart to the bar. He is set to the bar. Clerk. Mr. Hardheart, Thou art here indicted by the name of hard heart, an intruder upon the town of man's soul, for that thou didst most desperately and wickedly possess the town of man's soul with impenitency and obdurateness, and didst keep them from remorse and sorrow for their evils, all the time of their apostasy from and rebellion against the blessed King Shaddai. What sayest thou to this indictment? Art thou guilty or not guilty? Hard. My lord, I never knew what remorse or sorrow meant in all my life. I am impenetrable. I care for no man, nor can I be pierced with men's griefs. Their groans will not enter into my heart. Whomsoever I mischief, whomsoever I wrong, to me it is music, when to others mourning. Court. You see the man is a right Diabolonian, and has convicted himself. Set him by, jailor, and set Mr. False Peace to the bar. False Peace set to the bar. Mr. False Peace, thou art here indicted by the name of False Peace, an intruder upon the town of man's soul, for that thou didst most wickedly and satanically bring, hold, and keep the town of man's soul, both in her apostasy and in her hellish rebellion, in a false, groundless, and dangerous peace, and damnable security, to the dishonour of the king, the transgression of his law, and the great damage of the town of man's soul. What sayest thou? Art thou guilty of this indictment or not? Then said Mr. False Peace, Gentlemen, and you now appointed to be my judges, I acknowledge that my name is Mr. Peace, but that my name is False Peace I utterly deny. If your honours shall please to send for any that do intimately know me, or for the midwife that laid my mother of me, or for the gossips that were at my christening, they will, any or all of them, prove that my name is not False Peace, but Peace. Wherefore I cannot plead to this indictment, forasmuch as my name is not inserted therein, and as is my true name, so are also my conditions. I was always a man that loved to live at quiet, and what I loved myself, that I thought others might love also. Wherefore when I saw any of my neighbours to labour under a disquieted mind, I endeavoured to help them what I could, and instances of this good temper of mine many I could give. As 1, when at the beginning our town of man's soul did decline the ways of Shaddai, they, some of them, afterwards began to have disquieting reflections upon themselves what they had done. But I, as one troubled to see them disquieted, presently sought out means to get them quiet again. 2, when the ways of the old world and of Sodom were in fashion, if anything happened to molest those that were for the customs of the present times, I laboured to make them quiet again, and to cause them to act without molestation. 3, to come nearer home, when the wars fell out between Shaddai and Diabolus, if at any time I saw any of the town of man's soul afraid of destruction, I often used, by some way, device, invention, or other, to labour to bring them to peace again. Wherefore, since I have been always a man of so virtuous a temper as some say a peacemaker is, and if a peacemaker be so deserving a man as some have been bold to attest he is, then let me, gentlemen, be accounted by you, who have a great name for justice and equity in man's soul, for a man that deserveth not this inhuman way of treatment, but liberty, and also a license to seek damage of those that have been my accusers. Then said the clerk, Crier, make a proclamation. Crier. Oh, yes, forasmuch as the prisoner at the bar hath denied his name to be that which is mentioned in this indictment, the court requireth that if there be any in this place that can give information to the court of the original and right name of the prisoner, they would come forth and give in their evidence, for the prisoner stands upon his own innocency. Then came 2 into the court, and desired that they might have leave to speak what they knew concerning the prisoner at the bar. The name of the one was Search Truth, and the name of the other Vouch Truth. So the court demanded of these men if they knew the prisoner, and what they could say concerning him. For he stands, said they, upon his own vindication. Then said Mr. Search Truth, My lord, Court. Hold, give him his oath. Then they swear him. So he proceeded. Search. My lord, I know and have known this man from a child, and can attest that his name is False Peace. I know his father. His name was Mr. Flatter, and his mother, before she was married, was called by the name of Mrs. Soothup. And these two, when they came together, lived not long without this son, and when he was born, they called his name False Peace. I was his playfellow, only I was somewhat older than he, and when his mother did use to call him home from his play, she used to say, False Peace, come home quick, or I'll fetch you. Yea, I knew him when he sucked, and though I was then but little, yet I can remember that when his mother did use to sit at the door with him, or did play with him in her arms, she would call him 20 times together, My little False Peace, my pretty False Peace, and Oh, my sweet rogue, False Peace, and again, Oh, my little bird, False Peace, and How do I love my child? The gossips also know it is thus, though he has had the face to deny it in open court. Then Mr. Vouch-Truth was called upon to speak what he knew of him, so they swear him in. Then said Mr. Vouch-Truth, My lord, all that the former witness hath said is true. His name is False Peace, the son of Mr. Flatter, and of Mrs. Soothup, his mother, and I have in former times seen him angry with those that have called him anything else but False Peace, for he would say that all such did mock and nickname him. But this was in the time when Mr. False Peace was a great man, and when the Dibylonians were the brave men in man's soul. Court. Gentlemen, you have heard what these two men have sworn against the prisoner at the bar. And now, Mr. False Peace, to you. You have denied your name to be False Peace, yet you see that these honest men have sworn that that is your name. As to your plea, in that you are quite besides the matter of your indictment, you are not by it charged for evil-doing because you are a man of peace, or a peacemaker among your neighbours, but for that you did wickedly and satanically bring, keep, and hold the town of Mansoul, both under its apostasy from and in its rebellion against its king, in a false, lying, and damnable peace, contrary to the law of Shaddai, and to the hazard of the destruction of the then miserable town of Mansoul. All that you have pleaded for yourself is, that you have denied your name, etc. But here, you see, we have witnesses to prove that you are the man. For the peace that you so much boast of making among your neighbours, know that peace that is not a companion of truth and holiness, but that which is without this foundation, is grounded upon a lie, and is both deceitful and damnable, as also the great Shaddai hath said. Thy plea therefore has not delivered thee from what by the indictment thou art charged with, but rather it doth fasten all upon thee. But thou shalt have very fair play. Let us call the witnesses that are to testify to matter of fact, and see what they have to say for our lord the king against the prisoner at the bar. Clerk. Mr. Know-all, what say you for our lord the king against the prisoner at the bar? No. My lord, this man hath of a long time made it, to my knowledge, his business to keep the town of Mansoul in a sinful quietness in the midst of all her lewdness, filthiness, and turmoils, and hath said, and that in my hearing, Come, come, let us fly from all trouble, on what ground soever it comes, and let us be for a quiet and peaceable life, though it wanteth a good foundation. Clerk. Come, Mr. Hate-lies, what have you to say? Hate. My lord, I have heard him say that peace, though in a way of unrighteousness, is better than trouble with truth. Clerk. Where did you hear him say this? Hate. I heard him say it in Folly Yard, at the house of one Mr. Simple, next door to the sign of the Self-Deceiver. Yea, he hath said this to my knowledge 20 times in that place. Clerk. We may spare further witness. This evidence is plain and full. Set him by, jailor, and set Mr. No-Truth to the bar. Mr. No-Truth, thou art here indicted by the name of No-Truth, an intruder upon the town of Mansoul, for that thou hast always, to the dishonour of Shaddai and the endangering of the utter ruin of the famous town of man's soul, set thyself to deface and utterly to spoil all the remainders of the law and image of Shaddai that have been found in man's soul after her deep apostasy from her king to Diabolus, the envious tyrant. What sayest thou? Art thou guilty of this indictment, or not? No. Not guilty, my lord. Then the witnesses were called, and Mr. Know-all did first give in his evidence against him. No. My lord, this man was at the pulling down of the image of Shaddai. Yea, this is he that did it with his own hands. I myself stood by and saw him do it, and he did it at the commandment of Diabolus. Yea, this Mr. No-truth did more than this. He did also set up the horned image of the beast Diabolus in the same place. This also is he that at the bidding of Diabolus did rend and tear, and cause to be consumed, all that he could of the remainders of the law of the king, even whatever he could lay his hands on in man's soul. Clerk. Who saw him do this besides yourself? Hate. I did, my lord, and so did many more besides. For this was not done by stealth or in a corner, but in the open view of all. Yea, he chose himself to do it publicly, for he delighted in the doing of it. Clerk. Mr. No-truth, how could you have the face to plead not guilty, when you were so manifestly the doer of all this wickedness? No. Sir, I thought I must say something, and as my name is, so I speak. I have been advantaged thereby before now, and did not know but by speaking no truth I might have reaped the same benefit now. Clerk. Set him by, jailor, and set Mr. Pitiless to the bar. Mr. Pitiless, thou art here indicted by the name of Pitiless, an intruder upon the town of man's soul, for that thou didst most traitorously and wickedly shut up all bowels of compassion, and wouldst not suffer poor man's soul to condole her own misery when she had apostatized from her rightful king, but didst evade, and at all times turn her mind awry from those thoughts that had them in a tendency to lead her to repentance. What sayest thou to this indictment, guilty or not guilty? Not guilty of pitilessness. All I did was to cheer up according to my name, for my name is not Pitiless, but Cheer up. I could not abide to see man's soul inclined to melancholy. Clerk. How? Do you deny your name, and say it is not Pitiless, but Cheer up? Call for the witnesses. What say you, the witnesses, to this plea? No. My lord, his name is Pitiless, so he hath written himself in all papers of concern wherein he has had to do. But these Diabolonians love to counterfeit their names. Mr. Covetousness covers himself with the name of Good Husbandry, or the like. Mr. Pride can, when need is, call himself Mr. Neat, Mr. Handsome, or the like, and so of all the rest of them. Clerk. Mr. Telltrue, what say you? Tell. His name is Pitiless, my lord. I have known him from a child, and he hath done all that wickedness whereof he stands charged in the indictment. But there is a company of them that are not acquainted with the danger of damning. Therefore they call all those melancholy that have serious thoughts how that state should be shunned by them. Clerk. Set Mr. Haughty to the bar, jailor. Mr. Haughty, thou art here indicted by the name of Haughty, an intruder upon the town of man's soul, for that thou didst most traitorously and devilishly teach the town of man's soul to carry it loftily and stoutly against the summons that was given them by the captains of the king Shaddai. Thou didst also teach the town of man's soul to speak contemptuously and vilifyingly of their great king Shaddai, and didst moreover encourage, both by words and examples, man's soul to take up arms both against the king and his son Emmanuel. How sayest thou? Art thou guilty of this indictment or not? Haughty. Gentlemen, I have always been a man of courage and valour, and have not used, when under the greatest clouds, to sneak or hang down the head like a bulrush, nor did it at all at any time please me to see men veil their bonnets to those that have opposed them, yea, though their adversaries seem to have 10 times the advantage of them. I did not use to consider who was my foe, nor what the cause was in which I was engaged. It was enough to me if I carried it bravely, fought like a man, and came off a victor. Court. Mr. Haughty, you are not here indicted for that you have been a valiant man, nor for your courage and stoutness in times of distress, but for that you have made use of this your pretended valour to draw the town of Mansoul into acts of rebellion both against the great king and Emmanuel his son. This is the crime and the thing wherewith thou art charged in, and by the indictment. But he made no answer to that. Now when the court had thus far proceeded against the prisoners at the bar, then they put them over to the verdict of their jury, to whom they did apply themselves after this manner. Gentlemen of the jury, you have been here, and have seen these men. You have heard their indictments, their pleas, and what the witnesses have testified against them. Now what remains is, that you do forthwith withdraw yourselves to some place, where without confusion you may consider of what verdict, in a way of truth and righteousness, you ought to bring in for the king against them, and so bring it in accordingly. Then the jury, to wit, Mr. Belief, Mr. Trueheart, Mr. Upright, Mr. Hatebad, Mr. Love God, Mr. See Truth, Mr. Heavenly Mind, Mr. Moderate, Mr. Thankful, Mr. Humble, Mr. Good Work, and Mr. Zeal for God, withdrew themselves in order to their work. Now when they were shut up by themselves, they fell to discourse among themselves in order to the drawing up of their verdict. And thus Mr. Belief, for he was the foreman, began. Gentlemen, quoth he, for the men, the prisoners at the bar, for my part, I believe that they all deserve death. Very right, said Mr. Trueheart, I am wholly of your opinion. Oh, what a mercy is it, said Mr. Hatebad, that such villains as these are apprehended. Ay, ay, said Mr. Lovegod, this is one of the joyfullest days that ever I saw in my life. Then said Mr. Seatruth, I know that if we judge them to death, our verdict shall stand before Shaddai himself. Nor do I at all question it, said Mr. Heavenly Mind. He said, moreover, when all such beasts as these are cast out of man's soul, what a goodly town will it be then? Then, said Mr. Moderate, it is not my manner to pass my judgment with rashness, but for these their crimes are so notorious, and the witness so palpable, that that man must be wilfully blind who saith the prisoners ought not to die. Blessed be God, said Mr. Thankful, that the traitors are in safe custody. And I join with you in this upon my bare knees, said Mr. Humble. I am glad also, said Mr. Goodwork. Then said the warm man and true-hearted Mr. Zeal for God, Cut them off, they have been the plague, and have sought the destruction of man's soul. Thus therefore being all agreed in their verdict, they come instantly into the court. Clerk. Gentlemen of the jury, answer all to your names. Mr. Belief, 1. Mr. Trueheart, 2. Mr. Upright, 3. Mr. Hatebad, 4. Mr. Lovegod, 5. Mr. Seatruth, 6. Mr. Heavenly Mind, 7. Mr. Moderate, 8. Mr. Thankful, 9. Mr. Humble, 10. Mr. Goodwork, 11. And Mr. Zeal for God, 12. Good men and true, stand together in your verdict. Are you all agreed? Jury. Yes, my lord. Clerk. Who shall speak for you? Jury. Our foreman. Clerk. You, the gentlemen of the jury, being empanelled for our lord the king, to serve here in a matter of life and death, have heard the trials of each of these men, the prisoners at the bar. What say you? Are they guilty of that and those crimes for which they stand here indicted, or are they not guilty? Foreman. Guilty, my lord. Clerk. Look to your prisoners, jailor. This was done in the morning, and in the afternoon they received the sentence of death according to the law. The jailor therefore, having received such a charge, put them all in the inward prison, to preserve them there till the day of execution, which was to be the next day in the morning. But now to see how it happened, one of the prisoners, Incredulity by name, in the interim betwixt the sentence and the time of execution, brake prison and made his escape, and gets him away quite out of the town of Mansoul, and lay lurking in such places and holes as he might, until he should again have opportunity to do the town of Mansoul a mischief for their thus handling of him as they did. End of chapter 8. Chapter 9 of the Holy War. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. The Holy War by John Bunyan. Chapter 9. Now when Mr. Trueman, the jailor, perceived that he had lost his prisoner, he was in a heavy taking, because that prisoner was, to speak on, the very worst of all the gang. Wherefore first he goes and acquaints my Lord Mayor, Mr. Recorder, and my Lord Will-be-will with the matter, and to get of them an order to make search for him throughout the town of Mansoul. So an order he got, and search was made, but no such man could now be found in all the town of Mansoul. All that could be gathered was, that he had lurked a while about the outside of the town, and that here and there one or other had a glimpse of him as he did make his escape out of Mansoul. One or two also did affirm that they saw him without the town, going apace quite over the plain. Now when he was quite gone, it was affirmed by one Mr. Didsey that he ranged all over dry places, till he met with Diabolus his friend. And where should they meet one another but just upon Hellgate Hill? But oh, what a lamentable story did the old gentleman tell to Diabolus concerning what sad alteration Emmanuel had made in Mansoul. At first, how Mansoul had, after some delays, received a general pardon at the hands of Emmanuel, and that they had invited him into the town, and that they had given him the castle for his possession. He said, moreover, that they had called his soldiers into the town, coveted who should quarter the most of them. They also entertained him with the timbrel, song, and dance. But that, said Incredulity, which is the sorest vexation to me, is, that he hath pulled down, father, thy image, and set up his own, pulled down thy officers, and set up his own. Yea, and Will-be-will, that rebel who, one would have thought, should never have turned from us, he is now in as great favour with Emmanuel as ever he was with thee. But besides all this Will-be-will has received a special commission from his master to search for, to apprehend, and to put to death all manner of Diabolonians that he shall find in Mansoul. Yea, and this Will-be-will has taken and committed to prison already 8 of my lord's most trusty friends in Mansoul. Nay, further, my lord, with grief I speak it, they have been all arraigned, condemned, and, I doubt, before this executed in Mansoul. I told my lord of 8, and myself was the 9th, who should assuredly have drunk of the same cup, but that through craft I, as thou seest, have made mine escape from them. When Diabolus had heard this lamentable story, he yelled and snuffed up the wind like a dragon, and made the sky to look dark with his roaring. He also sware that he would try to be revenged on Mansoul for this. So they, both he and his old friend Incredulity, concluded to enter into great consultation, how they might get the town of Mansoul again. Now before this time the day was come in which the prisoners in Mansoul were to be executed. So they were brought to the cross, and that by Mansoul in most solemn manner. For the prince said that this should be done by the hand of the town of Mansoul, that I may see, said he, the forwardness of my now redeemed Mansoul to keep my word, and to do my commandments, and that I may bless Mansoul in doing this deed. Proof of sincerity pleases me well. Let Mansoul therefore first lay their hands upon these Diabolonians to destroy them. So the town of Mansoul slew them according to the word of their prince. But when the prisoners were brought to the cross to die, you can hardly believe what troublesome work Mansoul had of it to put the Diabolonians to death. For the men, knowing that they must die, and every of them having implacable enmity in their hearts to Mansoul, what did they but took courage at the cross, and there resisted the men of the town of Mansoul? Wherefore the men of Mansoul were forced to cry out for help to the captains and men of war. Now the great Shaddai had a secretary in the town, and he was a great lover of the men of Mansoul, and he was at the place of execution also. So he, hearing the men of Mansoul cry out against the strugglings and unruliness of the prisoners, rose up from his place, and came and put his hands upon the hands of the men of Mansoul. So they crucified the Dibylonians that had been a plague, a grief, and an offence to the town of Mansoul. Now when this good work was done, the prince came down to see, to visit, and to speak comfortably to the men of Mansoul, and to strengthen their hands in such work. And he said to them that, by this act of theirs he had proved them, and found them to be lovers of his person, observers of his laws, and such as had also respect to his honour. He said, moreover, to show them that they by this should not be losers, nor their town weakened by the loss of them, that he would make them another captain, and that of one of themselves, and that this captain should be the ruler of 1,000, for the good and benefit of the now flourishing town of Mansoul. So he called one to him whose name was Waiting, and bid him, Go quickly up to the castle gate, and inquire there for one Mr. Experience, that waiteth upon that noble captain, the Captain Credence, and bid him come hither to me. So the messenger that waited upon the good Prince Emmanuel went and said as he was commanded. Now the young gentleman was waiting to see the captain train and muster his men in the castle yard. Then said Mr. Waiting to him, Sir, the prince would that you should come down to his highness forthwith. So he brought him down to Emmanuel, and he came and made obeisance before him. Now the men of the town knew Mr. Experience well, for he was torn and bred in Mansoul. They also knew him to be a man of conduct, of valour, and a person prudent in matters. He was also a comely person, well spoken, and very successful in his undertakings. Wherefore the hearts of the townsmen were transported with joy, when they saw that the prince himself was so taken with Mr. Experience, that he would needs make him a captain over a band of men. So with one consent they bowed the knee before Emmanuel, and with a shout said, Let Emmanuel live for ever. Then said the prince to the young gentleman, whose name was Mr. Experience, I have thought good to confer upon thee a place of trust and honour in this my town of Mansoul. Then the young man bowed his head and worshipped. It is, said Emmanuel, that thou shouldst be a captain over 1,000 men in my beloved town of Mansoul. Then said the captain, Let the king live. So the prince gave out orders forthwith to the king's secretary that he should draw up for Mr. Experience a commission to make him a captain over 1,000 men. And let it be brought to me, said he, that I may set to my seal. So it was done as it was commanded. The commission was drawn up, brought to Emmanuel, and he set his seal thereto. Then by the hand of Mr. Waiting he sent it away to the captain. Now so soon as the captain had received his commission, he sounded his trumpet for volunteers, and young men came to him apace. Yea, the greatest and chief men in the town sent their sons to be listed under his command. Thus Captain Experience came under command to Emmanuel, for the good of the town of Mansoul. He had for his lieutenant one Mr. Skilful, and for his cornet one Mr. Memory. His under-officers I need not name. His colours were the white colours for the town of Mansoul, and his scutcheon was the dead lion and dead bear. So the prince returned to his royal palace again. Now when he was returned thither, the elders of the town of Mansoul, to wit the Lord Mayor, the Recorder, and the Lord Wilbywill, went to congratulate him, and in special way to thank him for his love, care, and the tender compassion which he showed to his ever-obliged town of Mansoul. So after a while and some sweet communion between them, the townsmen having solemnly ended their ceremony returned to their place again. Emmanuel also at this time appointed them a day wherein he would renew their charter, yea, wherein he would renew and enlarge it, mending several faults therein, that Mansoul's yoke might be yet more easy. And this he did without any desire of theirs, even of his own frankness and noble mind. So when he had sent for and seen their old one, he laid it by and said, Now that which decayeth and waxeth old is ready to vanish away. He said moreover, The town of Mansoul shall have another, a better, a new one, more steady and firm by far. An epitome hereof take as follows. Emmanuel, Prince of Peace, and a great lover of the town of Mansoul, I do in the name of my Father and of my own clemency give, grant, and bequeath to my beloved town of Mansoul, first, free, full and everlasting forgiveness of all wrongs, injuries, and offences done by them against my father, me, their neighbour, or themselves. Second, I do give them the holy law and my testament, with all that therein is contained for their everlasting comfort and consolation. Third, I do also give them a portion of the selfsame grace and goodness that dwells in my Father's heart and mine. Fourth, I do give, grant, and bestow upon them freely the world and what is therein, for their good, and they shall have that power over them as shall stand with the honour of my Father, my glory, and their comfort. Yea, I grant them the benefit of life and death, and of things present and things to come. This privilege no other city, town, or corporation shall have, but my man's soul only. Fifth, I do give and grant them leave and free access to me in my palace, at all seasons, to my palace above or below, there to make known their wants to me. And I give them moreover a promise that I will hear and redress all their grievances. Sixth, I do give, grant to, and invest the town of Mansoul with full power and authority to seek out, take, enslave, and destroy all and all manner of Babylonians that at any time, from whensoever, shall be found straggling in or about the town of Mansoul. Seventh, I do further grant to my beloved town of Mansoul that they shall have authority not to suffer any foreigner or stranger or their seed to be free in and of the blessed town of Mansoul, nor to share in the excellent privileges thereof, but that all the grants, privileges, and immunities that I bestow upon the famous town of Mansoul shall be for those the old natives, the true inhabitants thereof. To them I say, and to their right seed after them. But all Babylonians, of what sort, birth, country, or kingdom soever, shall be debarred a share therein. So when the town of Mansoul had received at the hand of Emmanuel their gracious charter, which in itself is infinitely more large than by this lean epitome is set before you, they carried it to audience, that is, to the market-place, and there Mr. Recorder read it in the presence of all the people. This being done, it was had back to the castle gates, and there fairly engraven upon the doors thereof, and laid in letters of gold, to the end that the town of Mansoul with all the people thereof might have it always in their view, or might go where they might see what a blessed freedom their prince had bestowed upon them, that their joy might be increased in themselves, and their love renewed to their great and good Emmanuel. But what joy, what comfort, what consolation, think you, did now possess the hearts of the men of Mansoul? The bells rung, the minstrels played, the people danced, the captains shouted, the colours waved in the wind, and the silver trumpet sounded, and the Babylonians now were glad to hide their heads, for they looked like them that had been long dead. When this was over, the prince sent again for the elders of the town of Mansoul, and communed with them about a ministry that he intended to establish among them, such a ministry that might open unto them, and that might instruct them in the things that did concern their present and future state. For, said he, you of yourselves, unless you have teachers and guides, will not be able to know, and, if not to know, to be sure not to do, the will of my Father. At this news, when the elders of Mansoul brought it to the people, the whole town came running together, for it pleased them well, as whatever the prince now did please the people. And all with one consent implored his majesty that he would forthwith establish such a ministry among them as might teach them both law and judgment, statute and commandment, that they might be documented in all good and wholesome things. So he told them that he would grant them their requests, and would establish 2 among them, one that was of his father's court, and one that was a native of Mansoul. He that is from the court, said he, is a person of no less quality and dignity than my father and I, and he is the Lord Chief Secretary of my father's house, for he is, and always has been, the chief dictator of all my father's laws, a person altogether well skilled in all mysteries, and knowledge of mysteries, as is my father, or as myself is. Indeed, he is one with us in nature, and also as to loving of, and being faithful to, and in the eternal concerns of the town of Mansoul. And this is he, said the prince, that must be your chief teacher, for it is he and he only that can teach you clearly in all high and supernatural things. He and he only it is that knows the ways and methods of my father at court, nor can any like him show how the heart of my Father is at all times, in all things, upon all occasions, towards man's soul. For as no man knows the things of a man but that spirit of a man which is in him, so the things of my Father knows no man but this his high and mighty secretary. Nor can any, as he, tell man's soul how and what they shall do to keep themselves in the love of my Father. He also it is that can bring lost things to your remembrance, and that can tell you the things to come. This teacher, therefore, must of necessity have the preeminence, both in your affections and judgment, before your other teacher. His personal dignity, the excellency of his teaching, also the great dexterity that he hath to help you to make and draw up petitions to my Father for your help, and to his pleasing, must lay obligations upon you to love him, fear him, and to take heed that you grieve him not. This person can put life and vigour into all he says, yea, and can also put it into your heart. This person can make seers of you, and can make you tell what shall be hereafter. By this person you must frame all your petitions to my Father and me, and without his advice and counsel first obtained, let nothing enter into the town or castle of man's soul, for that may disgust and grieve this noble person. Take heed, I say, that you do not grieve this minister, for if you do, he may fight against you, and should he once be moved by you to set himself against you in battle array, that will distress you more than if 12 legions should from my Father's court be sent to make war upon you. But, as I said, if you shall hearken unto him, and shall love him, if you shall devote yourselves to his teaching, and shall seek to have converse, and to maintain communion with him, you shall find him 10 times better than is the whole world to any. Yea, he will shed abroad the love of my Father in your hearts, and man's soul will be the wisest and most blessed of all people. Then did the prince call unto him the old gentleman, who before had been the recorder of man's soul, Mr. Conscience by name, and told him, that forasmuch as he was well skilled in the law and government of the town of man's soul, and was also well spoken, and could pertinently deliver to them his master's will in all terrene and domestic matters, therefore he would also make him a minister for, in, and to the goodly town of man's soul, in all the laws, statutes, and judgments of the famous town of man's soul. And thou must, said the prince, confine thyself to the teaching of moral virtues, to civil and natural duties, but thou must not attempt to presume to be a revealer of those high and supernatural mysteries that are kept close in the bosom of Shaddai my Father. For those things knows no man, nor can any reveal them but my Father's secretary only. Thou art a native of the town of man's soul, but the Lord Secretary is a native with my Father. Wherefore, as thou hast knowledge of the laws and customs of the corporation, so he of the things and will of my Father. Wherefore, O Mr. Conscience, although I have made thee a minister and a preacher to the town of man's soul, yet as to the things which the Lord Secretary knoweth and shall teach to this people, there thou must be his scholar and a learner, even as the rest of man's soul are. Thou must therefore in all high and supernatural things go to him for information and knowledge, for though there be a spirit in man, this person's inspiration must give him understanding. Wherefore, O thou, Mr. Recorder, keep low and be humble, and remember that the Babylonians that kept not their first charge, but left their own standing, are now made prisoners in the pit. Be therefore content with thy station. I have made thee my Father's vice-regent on earth, in such things of which I have made mention before. And thou, take thou power to teach them to man's soul, yea, and to impose them with whips and chastisements, if they shall not willingly hearken to thy commandments. And, Mr. Recorder, because thou art old, and through many abuses made feeble, therefore I give thee leave and license to go when thou wilt to my fountain, my conduit, and there to drink freely of the blood of my grape, for my conduit doth always run wine. Thus doing thou shalt drive from thy heart and stomach all foul, gross, and hurtful humours. It will also lighten thine eyes and will strengthen thy memory for the reception and keeping of all that the king's most noble secretary teacheth. When the prince had thus put Mr. Recorder, that once so was, into the place and office of a minister to man's soul, and the man had thankfully accepted thereof, then did Emmanuel address himself in a particular speech to the townsmen themselves. Behold, said the prince to man's soul, my love and care towards you. I have added to all that is past this mercy, to appoint you preachers, the most noble secretary to teach you in all high and sublime mysteries, and this gentleman," pointing to Mr. Conscience, "is to teach you in all things human and domestic, for therein lieth his work. He is not, by what I have said, debarred of telling to man's soul any thing that he hath heard and received at the mouth of the Lord High Secretary. Only he shall not attempt to presume to pretend to be a revealer of those high mysteries himself, for the breaking of them up, and the discovery of them to man's soul, lieth only in the power, authority, and skill of the Lord High Secretary himself. Talk of them he may, and so may the rest of the town of man's soul, yea, and may, as occasion gives them opportunity, press them upon each other for the benefit of the whole. These things, therefore, I would have you observe and do, for it is for your life and the lengthening of your days. And one thing more to my beloved Mr. Recorder, and to all the town of man's soul. You must not dwell in, nor stay upon, anything of that which he hath in commission to teach you, as to your trust and expectation of the next world. Of the next world, I say, for I purpose to give another to man's soul, when this with them is worn out. For that you must wholly and solely have recourse to, and make stay upon his doctrine that is your teacher after the first order. Yea, Mr. Recorder himself must not look for life from that which he himself revealeth. His dependence for that must be founded in the doctrine of the other preacher. Let Mr. Recorder also take heed that he receive not any doctrine or point of doctrine that is not communicated to him by his superior teacher, nor yet within the precincts of his own formal knowledge. Now after the prince had thus settled things in the famous town of man's soul, he proceeded to give to the elders of the corporation a necessary caution, to wit, how they should carry it to the high and noble captains that he had, from his father's court, sent or brought with him to the famous town of man's soul. "These captains," said he, "do love the town of man's soul, and they are picked men, picked out of abundance, as men that best suit, and that will most faithfully serve in the wars of Shaddai against the Babylonians, for the preservation of the town of man's soul. I charge you therefore," said he, "O ye inhabitants of the now flourishing town of man's soul, that you carry it not ruggedly or untowardly to my captains or their men, since, as I said, they are picked and choice men, men chosen out of many for the good of the town of man's soul. I say, I charge you, that you carry it not untowardly to them. For though they have the hearts and faces of lions, when at any time they shall be called forth to engage and fight with the king's foes, and the enemies of the town of man's soul, yet a little discountenance cast upon them from the town of man's soul will deject and cast down their faces, will weaken and take away their courage. Do not, therefore, O my beloved, carry it unkindly to my valiant captains and courageous men of war, but love them, nourish them, succour them, and lay them in your bosoms, and they will not only fight for you, but cause to fly from you all those the Babylonians that seek, and will, if possible, be your utter destruction. If, therefore, any of them should at any time be sick or weak, and so not able to perform that office of love, which, with all their hearts they are willing to do, and will do also when well and in health, slight them not nor despise them, but rather strengthen them and encourage them, though weak and ready to die, for they are your fence and your guard, your wall, your gates, your locks, and your bars. And although when they are weak they can do but little, but rather need to be helped by you, than that you should then expect great things from them, yet, when well, you know what exploits, what feats and warlike achievements they are able to do, and will perform for you. Besides, if they be weak, the town of man's soul cannot be strong. If they be strong, then man's soul cannot be weak. Your safety therefore doth lie in their health, and in your countenancing them. Remember also that if they be sick, they catch that disease of the town of man's soul itself. These things I have said unto you, because I love your welfare and your honour. Observe, therefore, O my man's soul, to be punctual in all things that I have given in charge unto you, and that not only as a town corporate, and so to your officers and guard and guides in chief, but to you, as you are a people whose well-being, as single persons, depends on the observation of the orders and commandments of their Lord. Next, O my man's soul, I do warn you of that, of which, notwithstanding that reformation that at present is wrought among you, you have need to be warned about, Wherefore hearken diligently unto me. I am now sure, and you will know hereafter, that there are yet of the Diabolonians remaining in the town of Mansoul, Diabolonians that are sturdy and implacable, and that do already while I am with you, and that will yet more when I am from you, study, plot, contrive, invent, and jointly attempt to bring you to desolation, and so to a state far worse than that of the Egyptian bondage. They are the avowed friends of Diabolus. Therefore look about you. They used heretofore to lodge with their prince in the castle, when incredulity was the lord mayor of this town. But since my coming hither, they lie more in the outsides and walls, and have made themselves dens, and caves, and holes, and strongholds therein. Wherefore, O Mansoul, thy work as to this will be so much the more difficult and hard, that is, to take, mortify, and put them to death, according to the will of my father. Nor can you utterly rid yourselves of them, unless you should pull down the walls of your town, the which I am by no means willing you should. Do you ask me, what shall we do then? Why, be you diligent, and quit you like men, observe their holes, find out their haunts, assault them, and make no peace with them, wherever they haunt, lurk, or abide, and what terms of peace soever they offer you, abhor, and all shall be well betwixt you and me. And that you may the better know them from those that are the natives of Mansoul, I will give you the brief schedule of the names of the chief of them, and they are these that follow: the Lord Fornication, the Lord Adultery, the Lord Murder, the Lord Anger, the Lord Lasciviousness, the Lord Deceit, the Lord Evil Eye, Mr. Drunkenness, Mr. Revelling, Mr. Idolatry, Mr. Witchcraft, Mr. Variance, Mr. Emulation, Mr. Wrath, Mr. Strife, Mr. Sedition, and Mr. Heresy. These are some of the chief, O Mansoul, of those that will seek to overthrow thee for ever. These, I say, are the skulkers in Mansoul. But look thou well into the law of thy king, and there thou shalt find their physiognomy, and such other characteristical notes of them, by which they certainly may be known. These, O my Mansoul, and I would gladly that you should certainly know it, if they be suffered to run and range about the town as they would, will quickly, like vipers, eat out your bowels. Yea, poison your captains, cut the sinews of your shoulders, break the bars and bolts of your gates, and turn your now most flourishing man's soul into a barren and desolate wilderness and ruinous heap. Wherefore, that you may take courage to yourselves to apprehend these villains wherever you find them, I give to you my Lord Mayor, the Lord Will-be-will, and Mr. Recorder, with all the inhabitants of the town of Mansoul, full power and commission to seek out, to take, and to cause to be put to death by the cross, all and all manner of Diabolonians, when and wherever you shall find them to lurk within, or to range without the walls of the town of Mansoul. I told you before that I had placed a standing ministry among you, not that you have but these with you, for my first 4 captains who came against the master and lord of the Diabolonians that was in Mansoul, they can, and if need be, and if they be required, will not only privately inform, but publicly preach to the corporation both good and wholesome doctrine, and such as shall lead you in the way. Yea, they will set up a weekly, yea, if need be, a daily lecture in thee, O Mansoul, and will instruct thee in such profitable lessons, that, if heeded, will do thee good at the end. And take good heed that you spare not the men that you have a commission to take and crucify. Now, as I have set before your eyes the vagrants and runagates by name, so I will tell you that among yourselves some of them shall creep in to beguile you, even such as would seem, and that in appearance are, very rife and hot for religion, and they, if you watch not, will do you a mischief, such an one as at present you cannot think of. These, as I said, will show themselves to you in another hue than those under description before. Wherefore, Mansoul, watch and be sober, and suffer not thyself to be betrayed. End of chapter 9. Chapter 10 of the Holy War. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. The Holy War by John Bunyan. Chapter 10. When the prince had thus far new modelled the town of Mansoul, and had instructed them in such matters as were profitable for them to know, then he appointed another day in which he intended, when the townsfolk came together, to bestow a further badge of honour upon the town of Mansoul, a badge that should distinguish them from all the people, kindreds, and tongues that dwell in the kingdom of Universe. Now it was not long before the day appointed was come, and the prince and his people met in the king's palace, where first Emmanuel made a short speech unto them, and did for them as he had said, and unto them as he had promised. My Mansoul, said he, that which I now am about to do is to make you known to the world to be mine, and to distinguish you also in your own eyes from all false traitors that may creep in among you. Then he commanded that those that waited upon him should go and bring forth out of his treasury those white and glistening robes, that I, said he, have provided and laid up in store for my Mansoul. So the white garments were fetched out of his treasury and laid forth to the eyes of the people. Moreover it was granted to them that they should take them and put them on, according, said he, to your size and stature. So the people were put into white, into fine linen, white and clean. Then said the prince unto them, This, O Mansoul, is my livery, and the badge by which mine are known from the servants of others. Yea, it is that which I grant to all that are mine, and without which no man is permitted to see my face. Wear them therefore for my sake, who gave them unto you, and also if you would be known by the world to be mine. But now can you think how Mansoul shone? It was fair as the sun, clear as the moon, and terrible as an army with banners. The prince added further and said, No prince, potentate, or mighty one of universe giveth this livery but myself. Behold therefore, as I said before, you shall be known by it to be mine. And now, said he, I have given you my livery. Let me give you also in commandment concerning them, and be sure that you take good heed to my words. First, wear them daily, day by day, lest you should at some times appear to others as if you were none of mine. Second, keep them always white, for if they be soiled, it is dishonour to me. Third, wherefore gird them up from the ground, and let them not lag with dust and dirt. Fourth, take heed that you lose them not, lest you walk naked, and they see your shame. Fifth, but if you should sully them, if you should defile them, the which I am greatly unwilling you should, and the Prince Diabolus will be glad if you would, then speed you to do that which is written in my law, that yet you may stand, and not fall before me and before my throne. Also this is the way to cause that I may not leave you, nor forsake you while here, but may dwell in this town of Mansoul for ever. And now was Mansoul and the inhabitants of it as the signet upon Emmanuel's right hand, where was there now a town, a city, a corporation, that could compare with Mansoul? A town redeemed from the hand and from the power of Diabolus, a town that the king Shaddai loved, and that he sent Emmanuel to regain from the prince of the infernal cave. Yea, a town that Emmanuel loved to dwell in, and that he chose for his royal habitation, a town that he fortified for himself, and made strong by the force of his army. What shall I say? Mansoul has now a most excellent prince, golden captains and men of war, weapons proved, and garments as white as snow. Nor are these benefits to be counted little, but great. Can the town of Mansoul esteem them so, and improve them to that end and purpose for which they are bestowed upon them? When the prince had thus completed the modelling of the town, to show that he had great delight in the work of his hands, and took pleasure in the good that he had wrought for the famous and flourishing Mansoul, he commanded, and they set his standard upon the battlements of the castle. And then, first he gave them frequent visits. Not a day now but the elders of Mansoul must come to him, or he to them, into his palace. Now they must walk and talk together of all the great things that he had done, and yet further promised to do, for the town of Mansoul. Thus would he often do with the Lord Mayor, my Lord Will-be-will, and the honest subordinate preacher, Mr. Conscience, and Mr. Recorder. But oh, how graciously, how lovingly, how courteously and tenderly did this blessed prince now carry it towards the town of Mansoul. In all the streets, gardens, orchards, and other places where he came, to be sure the poor should have his blessing and benediction. Yea, he would kiss them, and if they were ill he would lay hands on them, and make them well. The captains also he would daily, yea, sometimes hourly, encourage with his presence and goodly words. For you must know that a smile from him upon them would pour more vigour, more life and stoutness into them, than would anything else under heaven. The prince would now also feast them, and be with them continually. Hardly a week would pass, but a banquet must be had betwixt him and them. You may remember that, some pages before, we make mention of one feast that they had together, but now to feast them was a thing more common. Every day with man's soul was a feast day now. Nor did he, when they returned to their places, send them empty away. Either they must have a ring, a gold chain, a bracelet, a white stone, or something. So dear was man's soul to him now, so lovely was man's soul in his eyes. Second, when the elders and townsmen did not come to him, he would send in much plenty of provision unto them, meat that came from court, wine and bread that were prepared for his father's table. Yea, such delicates would he send unto them, and therewith would so cover their table, that whoever saw it confessed that the like could not be seen in any kingdom. Third, if man's soul did not frequently visit him as he desired they should, he would walk out to them, knock at their doors, and desire entrance, that amity might be maintained betwixt them and him. If they did hear and open to him, as commonly they would, if they were at home, then would he renew his former love, and confirm it too with some new tokens and signs of continued favour. And was it not now amazing to behold that in that very place where sometimes Diabolus had his abode, and entertained his Diabolonians to the almost utter destruction of man's soul, the Prince of Princes should sit eating and drinking with them, while all his mighty captains, men of war, trumpeters, with the singing men and singing women of his father, stood round about to wait upon them. Now did man's soul's cup run over, nor did her conduits run sweet wine. Nor did she eat the finest of the wheat, and drink milk and honey out of the rock. Now she said, How great is his goodness! For since I found favour in his eyes, how honourable have I been! The blessed prince did also ordain a new officer in the town, and a goodly person he was. His name was Mr. God's Peace. This man was set over my Lord Wilbywill, my Lord Mayor, Mr. Recorder, the subordinate preacher, Mr. Mind, and over all the natives of the town of Man's Soul. Himself was not a native of it, but came with the Prince Emmanuel from the court. He was a great acquaintance of Captain Credence and Captain Goodhope. Some say they were kin, and I am of that opinion too. This man, as I said, was made governor of the town in general, especially over the castle, and Captain Credence was to help him there. And I made great observation of it, that so long as all things went in man's soul as this sweet-natured gentleman would, the town was in most happy condition. Now there were no jars, no chiding, no interferings, no unfaithful doings in all the town of Man's Soul. Every man in Man's Soul kept close to his own employment. The gentry, the officers, the soldiers, and in all place observed their order. And as for the women and children of the town, they followed their business joyfully. They would work and sing from morning till night, so that quite through the town of Man's Soul now nothing was to be found but harmony, quietness, joy, and health. And this lasted all that summer. But there was a man in the town of Man's Soul, and his name was Mr. Carnal Security. This man did, after all this mercy bestowed on this corporation, bring the town of Man's Soul into great and grievous slavery and bondage. A brief account of him and of his doings take as followeth. When Diabolus at first took possession of the town of Man's Soul, he brought thither with himself a great number of Diabolonians, men of his own conditions. Now among these there was one whose name was Mr. Self-Conceit, and a notable brisk man he was, as any that in those days did possess the town of Man's Soul. Diabolus then, perceiving this man to be active and bold, sent him upon many desperate designs, the which he managed better, and more to the pleasing of his lord, than most that came with him from the dens could do. Wherefore, finding him so fit for his purpose, he preferred him, and made him next to the great Lord Wilbywill, of whom we have written so much before. Now the Lord Wilbywill, being in those days very well pleased with him, and with his achievements, gave him his daughter, the Lady Fear Nothing, to wife. Now of my lady Fear nothing did this Mr. Self-conceit beget this gentleman, Mr. Carnal Security. Wherefore there being then in man's soul those strange kinds of mixtures, it was hard for them in some cases to find out who were natives, who not, for Mr. Carnal Security sprang from my Lord Will-be-will by mother's side, though he had for his father a Diabolonian by nature. Well, this Carnal Security took much after his father and mother. He was self-conceited, he feared nothing. He was also a very busy man. Nothing of news, nothing of doctrine, nothing of alteration or talk of alteration could at any time be on foot in man's soul, but be sure Mr. Carnal Security would be at the head or tail of it. But, to be sure, he would decline those that he deemed the weakest, and stood always with them in his way of standing, that he supposed was the strongest side. Now when Shaddai the mighty and Emmanuel his son made war upon man's soul, to take it, this Mr. Carnal Security was then in town, and was a great doer among the people, encouraging them in their rebellion, putting them upon hardening themselves in their resisting the king's forces. But when he saw that the town of Mansoul was taken and converted to the use of the glorious Prince Emmanuel, and when he also saw what was become of Diabolus, and how he was unroosted and made to quit the castle in the greatest contempt and scorn, and that the town of Mansoul was well lined with captains, engines of war, and men, and also provision, what doth he but slyly wheel about also? And as he had served Diabolus against the good prince, so he feigned that he would serve the prince against his foes. And having got some little smattering of Emmanuel's things by the end, being bold, he ventures himself into the company of the townsmen, and attempts also to chat among them. Now he knew that the power and strength of the town of Mansoul was great, and that it could not but be pleasing to the people if he cried up their might and their glory. Wherefore he beginneth his tale with the power and strength of man's soul, and affirmed that it was impregnable, now magnifying their captains and their slings and their rams, then crying up their fortifications and strongholds, and lastly the assurances that they had from their prince, that man's soul should be happy for ever. But when he saw that some of the men of the town were tickled and taken with his discourse, he makes it his business, and, walking from street to street, house to house, and man to man, he at last brought man's soul to dance after his pipe, and to grow almost as carnally secure as himself. So from talking they went to feasting, and from feasting to sporting, and to some other matters. Now Emmanuel was yet in the town of Mansoul, and he wisely observed their doings. My Lord Mayor, my Lord Will-be-will, and Mr. Recorder were also all taken with the words of this tattling Diabolonian gentleman, forgetting that their prince had given them warning before, to take heed that they were not beguiled with any Diabolonian sleight. He had further told them that the security of the now flourishing town of Mansoul did not so much lie in her present fortifications and force, as in her so using of what she had, as might oblige her Emmanuel to abide within her castle. For the right doctrine of Emmanuel was, that the town of Mansoul should take heed that they forgot not his father's love and his; also that they should so demean themselves as to continue to keep themselves therein. Now this was not the way to do it, namely, to fall in love with one of the Diabolonians, and with such an one too as Mr. Carnal Security was, and to be led up and down by the nose by him. They should have heard their prince, feared their prince, loved their prince, and have stoned this naughty pack to death, and took care to have walked in the ways of their prince's prescribing, for then should their peace have been as a river, when their righteousness had been like the waves of the sea. Now when Emmanuel perceived that through the policy of Mr. Carnal Security the hearts of the men of Mansoul were chilled and abated in their practical love to him, first he bemoans them and condoles their state with the secretary, saying, "Oh, that my people had hearkened unto me, and that Mansoul had walked in my ways! I would have fed them with the finest of the wheat, and with honey out of the rock would I have sustained them." This done, he said in his heart, "I will return to the court and go to my place, till Mansoul shall consider and acknowledge their offence." And he did so. And the cause and manner of his going away from them was that Mansoul declined him, as is manifest in these particulars. 1. They left off their former way of visiting him. They came not to his royal palace as afore. 2. They did not regard nor yet take notice that he came or came not to visit them. 3. The love feast that had wont to be between their prince and them, though he made them still and called them to them, yet they neglected to come to them, or to be delighted with them. 4. They waited not for his counsels, but began to be headstrong and confident in themselves, concluding that now they were strong and invincible, and that man's soul was secure, and beyond all reach of the foe, and that her state must needs be unalterable for ever. Now, as was said, Emmanuel, perceiving that by the craft of Mr. Carnal Security the town of man's soul was taken off from their dependence upon him, and upon his father by him, and set upon what by them was bestowed upon it, he first, as I said, bemoaned their state. Then he used means to make them understand that the way they went on in was dangerous, for he sent my lord High Secretary to them, to forbid them such ways. But twice when he came to them, he found them at dinner in Mr. Carnal Security's parlour, and perceiving also that they were not willing to reason about matters concerning their good, he took grief and went his way. The which when he had told to the Prince Emmanuel, he took offence, and was grieved also, and so made provision to return to his father's court. Now the methods of his withdrawing, as I was saying before, were thus. 1. Even while he was yet with them in man's soul, he kept himself close, and more retired than formerly. 2. His speech was not now, if he came in their company, so pleasant and familiar as formerly. 3. Nor did he, as in times past, send to man's soul from his table those dainty bits which he was wont to do. 4. Nor when they came to visit him, as now and then they would he be so easily spoken with as they found him to be in times past. They might now knock once, yea, twice, but he would seem not at all to regard them, whereas formerly at the sound of their feet he would up and run, and meet them half-way, and take them too, and lay them in his bosom. But thus Emmanuel carried it now, and by this his carriage he sought to make them bethink themselves, and return to him. But alas, they did not consider, they did not know his ways, they regarded not, they were not troubled with these, nor with the true remembrance of former favours. Wherefore what does he but in private manner withdraw himself, first from his palace, then to the gate of the town, and so away from man's soul he goes, till they should acknowledge their offence, and more earnestly seek his face. Mr. God's peace also laid down his commission, and would for the present act no longer in the town of man's soul. Thus they walked contrary to him, and he again, by way of retaliation, walked contrary to them. But alas, by this time they were so hardened in their way, and had so drunk in the doctrine of Mr. Carnal Security, that the departing of their prince touched them not, nor was he remembered by them when gone, and so, of consequence, his absence not condoled by them. Now there was a day wherein this old gentleman, Mr. Carnal Security, did again make a feast for the town of man's soul. And there was at that time in the town one Mr. Godly Fear, one now but little set by, though formerly one of great request. This man, old Carnal Security, had a mind, if possible, to gull, and debauch, and abuse, as he did the rest, and therefore he now bids him to the feast with his neighbours. So the day being come, they prepare, and he goes and appears with the rest of the guests. And being all set at the table, they did eat and drink, and were merry, even all but this one man. For Mr. Godly Fear sat like a stranger, and did neither eat nor was merry. The which, when Mr. Carnal Security perceived, he presently addressed himself in a speech thus to him. "Mr. Godly Fear, are you not well? You seem to be ill of body or mind, or both. I have a cordial of Mr. Forget-Good's making, the which, sir, if you will take a dram of, I hope it may make you bonny and blithe, and so make you more fit for us, feasting companions." Unto whom the good old gentleman discreetly replied, "Sir, I thank you for all things courteous and civil, but for your cordial I have no list thereto, but a word to the natives of man's soul. You, the elders and chief of man's soul, to me it is strange to see you so jocund and merry, when the town of man's soul is in such woeful case." Then said Mr. Carnal Security, "You want sleep, good sir, I doubt. If you please, lie down and take a nap, and we meanwhile will be merry." Then said the good man as follows: "Sir, if you were not destitute of an honest heart, you could not do as you have done and do." Then said Mr. Carnal Security, "Why?" Godly: "Nay, pray interrupt me not. It is true the town of Mansoul was strong and, with a proviso, impregnable. But you, the townsmen, have weakened it, and it now lies obnoxious to its foes. Nor is it a time to flatter or be silent. It is you, Mr. Carnal Security, that have willily stripped Mansoul, and driven her glory from her. You have pulled down her towers, you have broken down her gates, you have spoiled her locks and bars. And now, to explain myself, from that time that my lords of Mansoul, and you, sir, grew so great, from that time the strength of Mansoul has been offended, and now he is arisen and gone. If any shall question the truth of my words, I will answer him by this, and such like questions. Where is the Prince Emmanuel? When did a man or woman in Mansoul see him? When did you hear from him, or taste any of his dainty bits? You are now a-feasting with this Diabolonian monster, but he is not your prince. I say, therefore, though enemies from without, had you taken heed, could not have made a prey of you, yet since you have sinned against your prince, your enemies within have been too hard for you." Then said Mr. Carnal Security, "Fie, fie, Mr. Godly Fear, fie! Will you never shake off your timorousness? Are you afraid of being sparrow-blasted? Who hath hurt you? Behold, I am on your side. Only yon are for doubting, and I am for being confident. Besides, is this a time to be sad in? A feast is made for mirth. Why then do you now, to your shame and our trouble, break out into such passionate, melancholy language, when you should eat and drink and be merry?" Then said Mr. Godly Fear again, "I may well be sad, for Emmanuel is gone from Mansoul. I say again, he is gone, and you, sir, are the man that has driven him away. Yea, he is gone without so much as acquainting the nobles of Mansoul with his going, and if that is not a sign of his anger, I am not acquainted with the methods of godliness. And now, my lords and gentlemen, for my speech is still to you. Your gradual declining from him did provoke him gradually to depart from you, the which he did for some time, if perhaps you would have been made sensible thereby, and have been renewed by humbling yourselves. But when he saw that none would regard, nor lay these fearful beginnings of his anger and judgment to heart, he went away from this place. And this I saw with mine eye, wherefore now while you boast your strength is gone, you are like the man that had lost his locks that before did wave about his shoulders. You may with this lord of your feast shake yourselves, and conclude to do as at other times, but since without him you can do nothing, and he is departed from you, turn your feast into a sigh, and your mirth into lamentation." Then the subordinate preacher, old Mr. Conscience by name, he that of old was recorder of Mansoul, being startled at what was said, began to second it thus: "Indeed, my brethren," quoth he, "I fear that Mr. Godly Fear tells us true. I, for my part, had not seen my prince a long season. I cannot remember the day for my part, nor can I answer Mr. Godly Fear's question. I doubt, I am afraid that all is naught with Mansoul." Godly: "Nay, I know that you shall not find him in Mansoul, for he is departed and gone. Yea, and gone for the fault the elders, and for that they regarded his grace with unsufferable unkindness." Then did the subordinate preacher look as if he would fall down dead at the table. Also all there present, except the man of the house, began to look pale and wan. But having a little recovered themselves, and jointly agreeing to believe Mr. Godly Fear in his sayings, they began to consult what was best to be done. Now Mr. Carnal Security was gone into his withdrawing-room, for he liked not such dumpish doings. Both to the man of the house for drawing them into evil, and also to recover Emmanuel's love. And with that saying of their prince came very hot into their minds, for he had bidden them do to such as were false prophets that should arise to delude the town of Mansoul. So they took Mr. Carnal Security, concluding that he must be he, and burned his house upon him with fire, for he also was a Babylonian by nature. So when this was past and over, they bespeed themselves to look for Emmanuel their prince. And they sought him, but they found him not. Then were they more confirmed in the truth of Mr. Godly Fear's sayings, and began also severely to reflect upon themselves for their so vile and ungodly doings, for they concluded now that it was through them that their prince had left them. Then they agreed and went to my lord secretary, him whom before they refused to hear, him whom they had grieved with their doings, to know of him, for he was a seer, and could tell where Emmanuel was, and how they might direct a petition to him. But the lord secretary would not admit them to a conference about this matter, nor would admit them to his royal place of abode, nor come out to them to show them his face or intelligence. And now was it a day gloomy and dark, a day of clouds and of thick darkness with man's soul. Now they saw that they had been foolish, and began to perceive what the company and prattle of Mr. Carnal Security had done, and what desperate damage his swaggering words had brought poor man's soul into. But what further it was likely to cost them they were ignorant of. Now Mr. Godly Fear began again to be in repute with the men of the town. Yea, they were ready to look upon him as a prophet. End of chapter 10.